Wow.
Great.
Okay. Tonight we're going to hear from Stacy Fatale from Massachusetts about the situation where the unhoused, the population numbers, uh, any possible solutions that Massachusetts is working on. Stacy, take it away.
Well, thanks, Mary Beth. Um, well, the first thing I'm going to do is just see if I can share this. So, let's see. I know I've done this before with, uh,
Does it have sound?
no.
Okay.
Um,
You just have to hit that green square that says share.
oh, there you go. Thanks. All right. Okay, just a sec. All right. Okay. So the first thing is I'm issuing a disclaimer. This meeting is being recorded, so I'm just saying this is a draft PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is selection of data and resources. It's for the sole purpose of information discussion for Wealth Committee on Women, Money, and Democracy. I'm saying that because, yeah, I'm sure you might share it with Will, but I do not consider this to be like a polished presentation. It's just a selection of resources and data. Okay, so I'm just going to go pretty quickly, actually. I did source all my data. Um,
Did you share screen?
yeah, didn't I share it?
You did.
No.
It's not in slideshow mode if you want slideshow mode, but
Oh,
I see it.
Okay, now I see it.
okay. So the slides are also basically in order, but they could be in a better order. And I'm really just using the slides to guide my presentation, not really, they're not really polished slides. Okay. So what I really wanted to say, I'll start actually here for an overview. Um, now, okay, so here's what I have. I'll just read it here. So Massachusetts has a right to shelter law. And however, it's for families with children and pregnant women. So it doesn't address, for example, individual homelessness or the unhoused. And there's been, if you've been following the news about Massachusetts or you know anything, you've heard headlines, because there was a great influx of immigrant families into Massachusetts the last few years for various reasons, which I won't go into. Um, there was just a great increase in homelessness. However, unlike the rest of the nation, most of the homeless in Massachusetts are families. And the reason for that is because of because of the right to shelter. Okay. Um, and some of you may have read that in the last few years, we've had an increase in emergency shelter system use, families housed in hotels and facilities that were staffed by the National Guard. However, there's now a cap on how many families can be in the emergency shelter system, and length of stay is also limited. And also the hotels that were being used to house a lot of the temporary housing for the homeless families were actually they're closing down at the end of July. So there's been like a rapid shift. By the way, also this presentation is not gonna touch on youth or veterans like as distinct groups because like if you look at all kinds of reports, you'll see data on there's youth homelessness, veterans, and so on. I'm not going to address those categories. I'm just going to touch on a few categories. Okay, then I wanted to also just bring up the fact that people who work in the housing field, they use the statistics called the point in time count. and it's one night in January each year. In January, every year there's these organizations that deal with the homeless are authorized to count, like in every city and town, basically, how many homeless there are in any given night in January. And that's how they come up with a consistent measure of homelessness, even though that measurement is probably off. Because there could, for example, in January in Massachusetts, could be quite cold. So there could be people who are, and now I'm kind of switching to individuals in a way, who like might be on this, who might be chronically unhoused. Um, they may be in seasonal nighttime shelters because of the cold. So even though it's a regular point in time count, it's not um, just like any count. It may or may not be really accurate. Um, so so for 2023, so this goes back. Um, let's see, it says 7%, slightly under 1/3 of the total number of people experiencing family homelessness nationwide were in New York, and they were essentially all sheltered, and 7% were in Massachusetts. Okay, 12,882 people. Actually, that's going back to, so that's, I'm kind of switching between individuals and families. The resource I have here is the 2023 Annual Homelessness Assessment Report to Congress from HUD. Okay. Okay, so even though I'm doing Massachusetts, just for probably homelessness is just like any other issue, it's helpful to talk about it in terms of comparison. States with the highest number this is from the 2024 Annual Homelessness Assessment. States with the highest number of people in families with children experiencing homelessness in 2024 were New York, 95,457 people, and California, 25,639 people. However, the states that had the highest share of families with children experiencing homelessness among all people experiencing homelessness were Massachusetts, 76%, New York, 60%, and Illinois, 52%. So in Massachusetts, there's another definition called continuum of care. So it's like Massachusetts is divided into different sections, and these are sections that are kind of take care of the issues of homelessness in Massachusetts. So, for example, Waltham, Watertown, Newton, they're all in the continuum of care section, their own section. Another large urban area, one is Boston and one is Cambridge. So they have their own continuum of care, whereas then there's 9 continuum of cares that are largely suburban. So we're a suburban, Waltham is suburban. Just so the team knows, I started with Massachusetts and Waltham. So maybe it was kind of a big chunk. So I might be switching between the two. I hope it's not confusing. So back to this, 3 of every 4 people experiencing homelessness in Massachusetts, 76%, were doing so in families with children, the highest share in the country. Between 2023 and 2024, Massachusetts had a 74% increase in family homelessness. Many of these continuums of care attributed this increase to the state's right to shelter law and its application to hundreds of recently arrived migrant families, refugees, and asylum seekers who did not yet have living arrangements coming to the state. And then in August 2023, the governor of Massachusetts declared a state of emergency regarding newly arrived migrant families, unlocking additional shelter beds and other resources to help place these families in emergency shelters. Other factors contributing to the increase related to overall expanded shelter capacity, a high cost of living, inflation, increase in rents, and lack of affordable housing. Okay, so kind of switching to what has Massachusetts done for the entire Commonwealth recently that's actually helping housing. Now, why am I bringing up housing? Well, you'll see in these sources, if you do look into them yourself, that one of the causes of homelessness, so moving away from the immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker issue, is lack of affordable housing. So that's one of the factors contributing to homelessness. So the most recent legislation I found was the Affordable Homes Act, which was signed in August 2024. It has many, many features. It's 8 pages fact sheet. I'm just going to describe 3 right here. That's supposed to help get more affordability in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts has high rents and high median home prices. So there's going to be a $200 million for housing innovation to support alternative forms of rental housing, including single person occupancy units, transitional and permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness, housing for seniors and veterans, and transitional units for persons recovering from substance use disorder. Another feature is eviction record sealing, which can be a barrier for renters and others, and also income-based support for down payments and closing costs in certain communities. So that's for people seeking like a home buying situation. But it's 8 pages. There's lots and lots of things included in this. Now, before this act, the MBTA Communities Act was passed several years back. Actually, was passed in the prior governor's administration, Governor Baker. Like our current governor is now running for her second term. Well, Governor Baker, this MBTA Communities Act was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor at that time. So we're going back several years now. However, it's been being implemented during the current governor's term. And actually, this kind of transitions also into Waltham too, because it affects many cities and towns in Waltham, including Waltham, where I live. And it basically requires changes to zoning near public transit. So, for example, we have a commuter rail that goes into Boston and beyond, from out west. And there are several commuter lines train lines in Massachusetts. So changes to zoning near public transit so that more multifamily housing can be built. And the hoped for outcomes include increased moderate and low income housing opportunities, reduced traffic, keep working people in Massachusetts, keep people in Massachusetts to work, reduce car commutes, and prevent homelessness. Because what happens is, like Waltham, for example, many, many people come to work in Waltham, but not necessarily everyone has a place to live in Waltham. Waltham actually has a pretty thriving employer presence and provides a good tax base for Waltham. However, there's been, research that really, you know, not everybody who works in Waltham lives in Waltham. I even had, like, about a couple years ago, a young man who worked, this is just an anecdote, I'm kind of going off of this, but he was in his late 20s. And he asked my husband and I point blank, he said, "You guys going to sell your house soon? Because I'd really be interested in buying into Waltham." But anyway, so it's not necessarily easy for people who are coming up to find housing where they work in Waltham. Okay. I think I did point in time. I talked about that. I talked about continuums of cares, our local planning bodies who coordinate the full range of homeless services in a geographic area. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of move into Waltham. Now I never found, and I'm sure there is a figure. I still did not find a sort of a close to estimate figure of the homeless population in Waltham or unhoused. There are these stats, like if you go into the homeless shelter lodges, how many beds they have available on any given day or night, and I could probably go in and add them up. That might be one way to look at the data, but I hadn't found a specific figure. And also, like if you go into any of these reports, some of them, and I can identify later maybe when we talk, some of them have really refined definitions of homelessness. And I'm speaking kind of broadly here, but they have really refined. And so how you do the count and who you're counting, like temporary shelters, emergency shelters, chronically unhoused, and so on. Usually chronically unhoused are usually like they have a disability or something like that. So anyway, we have approximately 64,700 residents. We are a city. It it had prior industries, like in the industrial era, we had cotton textile mills, we have the Waltham Watch Factory. Currently, we have Brandeis and Bentley University. As I said earlier, we have many businesses in Waltham. It's really a complex and thriving city, I think, interesting city to live in. Um, Now here I'm going to go through some advocacy and homeless or organizations that um, help the homeless, the unhoused, people who might are on the verge of eviction, that type of thing. I started off with WIN because it's an advocacy group. I'm not, it's really, like I said earlier, I'm not really doing this like in order. This is kind of just how it came up. Um, I know some of the people in this group, WIN. I've been to at least just one of their meetings, but I know a lot of the people in it because they kind of intersect with other issues that I've been involved with. And it's and actually we know the guy who actually started this. He recently got an award from the Waltham Democratic City Committee because he's really worked hard on the issue of housing in Waltham. And they have I put in the website there for them. They're really focused on advocacy, for example, providing testimony at city council meetings by informing the members or their distribution list, which I'm on, to contact your city councilors about rental and housing issues. So for example, I attended a meeting, a city council meeting about 2 months ago, and people were giving testimony because the city of Waltham had hired a zoning consultant. And before the zoning consultant was going to include public testimony about housing in Waltham, and it was a bunch of different people. It was homeowners who had been homeowners for many years. It was renters, and so Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods is a good resource for organizing people around housing. Is what I want to say. So I remember going back to this and kind of switching into housing because even though the people who were speaking weren't homeless, sometimes I'm going to echo this theme is that lack of affordable housing is identified as one of the causes of homelessness. Okay. So anyway, now even tonight there's a zoning board appeals meeting, which I know about. And like one of the issues they're trying to address right now is apparently, for example, students who've gotten together to live in apartments because they were in a matching service with other renters because when they were, let's say, going to school, maybe at Brandeis, let's say, or another school. Well, apparently, now I don't know how they picked up on this, but the group said there's apparently been an effort by a department in the city to classify these apartments as rooming houses, and this would shut them down as apartments. So this would not be good for renters because renting in Waltham as a single individual has become out of reach for many. Now, here's where I go. I'm going to skip to, actually, I'll show you what the rent. Okay, so here we have just for May, as of May 2024. I'm sure I could get a more recent one, but this looks accurate. Two-bedroom unit in Waltham as of May 2024 is $2,700 a month. Like that's probably a median. And the January 2024 median home listing price in Waltham was 817,450 in versus 799,900 in January 2023. So there's been an increase in over 27% over time of 2021 to 2024. Like the last 3 years, 27% increase in median home price listing. And for example, I heard anecdotally, there's another organization here, Watch CDC, who fields a lot of calls on evictions. And they just say like, as soon as let's say a renter, a rental unit, or a landlord raises the price of one unit, it's like the one next door will raise the price. It's very difficult for Waltham renters to keep up with the quick changes in the monthly rental price increase. Let me see. Okay, here's some other organizations beside WIN that are engaged with the homeless. Back to the homeless. So WIN is not, I would say WIN is not specifically about the homeless. What they're trying to do is zoning stuff. They're trying to make sure that people are made aware of what's changing with housing in the city. But going into homelessness, here's a slide on the advocacy organizations and the actual shelters. We have Bristol Lodge, one for men, one for women, temporary emergency shelter. They have case management, mental health and substance use referrals. We have, now this is more like in the food area and the companion and keeping people socially connected. Chaplains on the Way is a big group of people, volunteers, literally religious churches, temples, but also just general people who want to volunteer to help people, making breakfast every morning year round. A lot of donors to that. There's a foundation that contributes. There's also a voluntary organization, Food Not Bombs. That could be national. Maybe some of you know about it because they're really engaged with politically, literally Food Not Bombs. And every Sunday afternoon, they have a home cooked vegan meal on the Waltham Common. And it's for everyone. It's not just for the homeless. It's just that's another volunteer effort in Waltham. We also have down here, Waltham Housing Authority, which is with the city of Waltham. Okay. So that's going to help people who might be applying for low-income housing. Okay. And then we have Community Day Center, back to the homeless. We have drop-in day center, case management. They can have clothing, substance use support for recovery. They have a seasonal night program. So people who might, be on the street, chronically unhoused, but they will come in maybe at the coldest times of the year and get a warm place to sleep. So Waltham does have resources for the unhoused. And the chronically unhoused. Now these would be more of like the individuals, not the families that I was talking about earlier. I mean, they could be families, but then the families would probably get into the shelter system and get different services. So here's about barriers and solutions, and then I'll move to the conclusion. So I don't expect you to read it all, but so some of the this is from the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan from last year. We know that there are certain barriers to affordable housing in each community, like land use controls, tax policies affecting land, zoning ordinances, which, by the way, the MBTA Communities Act was passed to override certain zoning ordinances. Building codes, fees and charges, growth limitations, policies affecting the return on residential investment. Some of the actions that could help affordable housing in Waltham include utilizing city-owned property to create new affordable housing units via building renovations and remodels, appropriating Community Preservation Act funds to go towards historic renovation projects that can also support affordable housing, continuing to provide rental assistance and home rehabilitation programs for residents, allocating a minimum 5% of annual building permit fees to increase the annual municipal housing trust fund, amending local zoning ordinances, legalize apartments that were not permitted and or do not presently comply with building and fire codes. And then there's the Waltham Housing Authority, West Metro Home Consortium, fair housing training opportunities. Something I did not list actually that was in the new Affordable Homes Act is accessory dwelling units are now permitted. That's a big deal because people can now, without getting a special permit, they can actually build like a little sort of kid's house or other person's house on their property. So it used to be hard. I think it was they're making it easier to get like families, let's say, might want to have a more extended family on their property and making it easier to do something like that. And so going to the conclusion. So I know this was a mixture of both Massachusetts and Waltham, but so among large US cities, this is pretty recent. So I'm speaking of Boston now, it has the second highest rate of homelessness, but also the eighth lowest rate of unsheltered homelessness. That has to do with our right to shelter law for families. While substance use, mental health challenges, poverty, domestic violence, and a history of incarceration contribute to cases of homelessness, they do not, this is this report's conclusion, Boston indicators. They do not explain the region's high homelessness rates compared to other metro areas. The main differentiator is Greater Boston's shortage of affordable market rate housing, which limits options for families with modest means. The region's thriving economy has not been matched by sufficient housing development, leading to higher rates of homelessness than in places with more affordable housing options. The near-term challenge of increased demand for temporary shelter from families and those seeking asylum is pressing, but addressing homelessness in Greater Boston in the long term will require structural solutions, especially the construction of far more diverse, lower-cost housing. This approach will ensure that families at all income levels can access decent housing without risking bouts of homelessness. So, I guess that's it for the formal presentation. I think that the Affordable Homes Act and the MBTA Communities Act were recent efforts in Massachusetts to address some of these barriers to housing and the lack of affordable housing. However, we know that chronic homelessness or the in-house is a complex issue because of all the previous issues that were listed, such as mental health, substance abuse, poverty, people with a history of incarceration, and all these other kinds of things that keep people from having well, they are used as barriers to help. We can discuss that, how that happens, but those are some of the chronic issues. So that's what I have for now. So,
I see Jean has her hand up. Go ahead,
yeah.
Jean. You're on mute, though.
Mute. Yes, I was pleased to hear about the MBTA. That's the Boston Transit Authority. And yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
sorry, let me
Right.
say that out. Thanks for saying Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority. Correct. That's
okay.
the commuter rail, the bus lines, the subway, the whole transportation system.
Great, great. Because I think a lot of homeless people may try to take shelter like in the subways and stuff. And I think, if you could build homes, basic tiny homes nearby or small apartments, it would really help. If they were, near
But if you see this article,
transportation too.
yeah, this actual article actually I think addressed people near the tunnel, not the train tracks and things like
Mhm.
that. Places like Lowell and Worcester have the train.
Mhm.
So what you're saying is people do congregate around those places.
Mhm. Right.
Did you get to talk to any advocates or activists to support the homeless in your area, Stacy?
Well, not for this. No, I just did this more as a, research.
Research.
Yeah.
Okay.
For as far as people, I don't like on your template that you told me about. Unfortunately, I didn't. I think I looked at it before, but then because I went away on vacation, a lot of things I didn't look at it again until you reminded me. But I do know people. I do know the individuals. I know their titles. I know, um, you know, I mean, yeah, they're available. I don't know what's your follow-up question on that. I mean, I've had a meeting. I've talked to the Watch CDC. I didn't mention Watch CDC. I forgot to show you that one. Watch CDC is a community development corporation, and it was started in 1988, and it deals with like evictions. It deals with, it has legal aid, it has tutoring for English, it has tutoring in personal finances and things like that. I know the person who runs that, like I just know somebody, not like a friend, but I just know who they are. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up that, Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods seems hopeful.
mhm. Yeah, and let's see if I can find Watch. Watch is another big one that
Watch.
fields. Yeah, it's called Watch. It fields calls from people, especially whose rent has suddenly risen and they can't pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, they can't do much about it, but they do get calls from Watch. Here it is. Waltham Alliance for Teaching, Community Organizing, and Housing. So Community Development Corporation. So there's a tenant clinic. And yeah, they provide resources for food, housing, mental health, tenant rights, assistance with moving, eviction issues. So again, I actually volunteered for this organization for a few months. I did just volunteer English assistance teaching in the classroom, just helping out. I did that for about 6 months, just a couple times a week. So I know a little bit about what Watch does.
Jean still has her hand up. Do you have another question, Jean?
Not so much, yeah, question, maybe comment. I just think it's wonderful what they're doing in Vermont. We have something called no cause eviction. In other words, trying to say that, for different reasons, renters cannot be evicted. I do have a question about how involved is like Brandeis and Bentley? Because here in Burlington, some of the cause for homelessness, I think, is the number of students that the university does not house on campus, and so they take over the rental units, and it's like, this is
Yeah,
not right. So what's
right.
with Brandeis and Bentley?
Yeah. Well, you really hit on something, Gene, because I know the last few years I wasn't aware of it because again, in my kind of bubble too, how much that was happening. Yeah, so students, so Brandeis, as I understood it, and
Mhm.
don't know the current situation, but I have heard from people who know, like these organizations,
Mhm.
that um the university I'm speaking particularly of Brandeis. I don't know about Bentley, but I bet
Mhm.
Bentley's in on this too. But Brandeis in particular may not have enough housing for all the people they accept.
Mhm.
That's what I've heard in past years. And so the students look for apartments in Waltham.
Mhm.
And it's I don't know how some landlords think of it. I don't know how they interact with the university on it. However, I do know that there have been signs, like literally yard signs and efforts in certain parts of Waltham to say something like no students in Waltham, like in our area. And it was kind of euphemistic. That's not what they said, but the idea was that complaints to the city that these students were making too much noise
Mhm.
and et cetera. They didn't want them in their particular area. And so I don't know if the city is, how the city works with Brandeis or anything, or how the housing department works with Brandeis to kind of mediate the situation. I don't know what they do, but I haven't seen those signs in the last year. I don't know if something's been done. But you're right that at least that's an example of the university where the students don't have a place to live on campus and
Yeah.
they seek housing in the city.
Right.
Are there other questions for Stacy? Yes, Ricky,
Oh,
go ahead.
in Massachusetts, do you have, in Vermont, we have, it's like a progressive, home ownership property tax so
Hmm.
that you don't have to pay your full property taxes according to your, the state will help the city with the property tax of people whose incomes are low, and then it's graduated.
Yeah, I don't know about in general, but I do know there's something for seniors. I think
Uh-huh.
it's called the circuit breaker,
Ah, okay.
where they don't, where they don't have, if they have a certain income or don't have a certain income, they don't have to pay or
Mm-hmm.
or pay minimal property taxes.
Okay.
Did you have your hand up, Ricky?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that it's kind of exciting that Massachusetts already has this right to shelter.
Yeah.
Uh, Sounds like a statute, which is what Jean was, proposing for Vermont here. So
Right.
maybe we should try to get a copy of that legislation and
Yeah.
give us a project to do.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, Stacy, this is wonderful, all the information that you put together. And it's good to know there's, already a lot happening. You used a phrase, I didn't understand what it meant. It was, I think, if I can read my writing here, I think it says use urban infill. What does that mean?
Oh, did I put that in one of the, okay, that must have been in one of the slides. Yeah, so that comes from Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods. So that's getting a little deep into the details, but so what I found interesting about Waltham Inclusive Neighborhoods and their website, it's actually called Mass Politics. Go to www.walthampolitics.com, and it's like there's several different sources on there, including This this is that so there's this phrase called urban infill, which is something I just learned from
Mhm.
reading their website, which is that um, sort of contrary to my stereotype. Um, this is an idea that, especially like in a dense area where there's a large population, it's better to have denser housing, and because are, are there are there are large areas like parking lots that are like heat absorbers all day.
Uh-huh.
And it's true because I've been in the city during the day and driving around. And there are parking lots that large spots of cement and everything that go unused. So there's this idea called urban infill, and that would help to, I think, reduce warming. Um, that could also include like planning that would include things like trees and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
that was the urban infill that I was talking about. So if anyone wants to look into that, this could be like an environmental phrase,
Mhm.
I think.
Mhm. Great.
So,
Interesting.
so they have a parking lot that's unused. What are they using? What are you suggesting that they would use it for?
Me? Housing.
Yeah, housing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it never is used? It's like it's not that there are down times, but
Oh, it's used. I mean, it's used. It would be used. It might be used like, let's say, I can think of times when it's more used. Like, for example, maybe during the farmers market on Saturday. It
uh-huh.
might be used. I'm thinking of one parking lot in particular, but there are several parking lots that Waltham has. I'm thinking of one right now that I know of that's close to like the farmers market on a Saturday, and not that would be used a little bit more. It could also be
Okay.
used for I mean, I've noticed more people from surrounding communities to Waltham coming in for actually the indivisible standouts.
Mhm.
Ah,
There are people who've
Yeah.
been driving. I mean, they have been like on a Saturday, for example. I just know that because I've been out. I know people are coming in from Newton and they're coming in from Arlington, so I know they're driving and they're using that
Yeah.
garage. However, you know, they're just they have pictures actually on that site of of, of parking lots that are just empty or have a few cars in them during the
Mary
day.
has her hand up.
Yes.
Oh, I am not on mute. First of all, thank you for your research, Stacy. And boy, we have a lot to learn about this, I think. I want to keep track because I said I'd do it for Wisconsin later too. I want to kind of keep track of the main points that you tried to make. And you said you'd come back and emphasize one certain point. And I would think, tell me, was that the fact of insufficient affordable housing? Was that the main point? And the other main point I thought I understood was increasing over time the homelessness. And more people are finding themselves homeless in Waltham, also in Massachusetts. Now, do I have that straight?
In Massachusetts, yes. And if you look on some of the links here, and I'm trying to think of one or two. Here's one that I like. Maybe a lot of them are good, but homelessness in Greater Boston trends. This one, August 2024, Boston indicators. If you like, maybe I'll copy and paste that to the chat. That shows trends. So lack of affordable housing is mentioned in at least two of the sources I saw as like a trigger for homelessness. However, I was putting aside the recent issue of the vast increase in asylees, immigrant families coming in, and not to overdo it, but in the last couple of years, it's been a major issue with Governor Healy that, well, Massachusetts, not the governor, Massachusetts, that they've had to be housed in hotels. Yeah, and people in the emergency shelter system have too. But Massachusetts was looking for ways to handle it, and they used, you know, hotels and facilities that were guarded by the National Guard. But then the news reports started coming out about things like sexual assault in the facilities. And, you know, Governor Healy, I think, knew that, you know, not only was this not good that there was such a vast increase in family homelessness, but also politically is very bad too.
So
And so some people have been so there's been some criticism because even though we have a right to shelter for families, she's put caps on it, like cap on the maximum amount of people in the emergency shelter system, and time limits. So and with the time limits, it's not like a cruel thing because there are organizations. I mean, it's not just, it's like, it's not cruelty. I shouldn't even use that word. It's like there are case managers and people trying to get, like, for example, that they were trying to get people get work authorizations and things like that to hook them up with actually jobs too, even. And that was happening. And that does happen actually. So I don't know if I answered your question. Did I?
well, now I'm understanding that quite a bit of emphasis is placed on recent arrivals. And I'm looking for things that might be common among all our states. In Wisconsin, the recent arrival thing happened more like around 2000, right after NAFTA. But where you live, am I understanding that the whole recent arrival thing is much more recent, just more in the last two or 3 years?
Yeah, that's what's been happening. Like I would say the last 2 or 3 years. And so I actually wanted to separate that issue and kind of from what you're saying, which is that to have the shelter system, I think Governor Healing wants to have the shelter system focus more exclusively on longer term residents who are experiencing like temporary homelessness due to the reasons that are listed here about some of the reasons why people are homeless, including unaffordability.
Okay, all right. So, all right. So then the main thread that you said you wanted to emphasize, it was not the question then of shortage of affordable housing. It was, please tell me what it was again. I'm going to make a note.
So yes, in the sources, lack of affordable housing, like by the experts, is identified as a cause for homelessness,
Okay,
and one of the
all right.
causes for homelessness.
All right. Thank you so much. I might have another question, but I'm interested to hear what others are asking too.
But not me. I'm not saying it. I'm kind of trying to identify what the sources are saying.
Okay. Okay. I really appreciate all you did. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
I wondered, Stacy, if you had any feeling, I know you spent like the last month or so collecting this information, and that big, beautiful, horrible bill came up during that time. I wonder if you have any feel for what the fallout will be from that for homeless programs and for uh, funding for addressing these issues.
I don't. I mean, I did read something just today that it was actually a letter to the editor I read in the Boston Globe that was published on July 8th. I had it in one of my tabs, but I don't have it on this. It's basically it's saying the kind of what you're saying, that the cuts to the medical care would definitely would lead to homelessness. And the writer who worked in public health was saying, sort of pleading with the governor to move away from her plan to close all the hotel shelters by the end of July, which is the plan. And in fact, they are at a pace to meet their goal, except for maybe 4 hotels they're going to keep open. So this writer who works in public health was saying that the medical loss of medical insurance is going to lead to homelessness. And so that's one example of the big beautiful bill, big betrayal bill, affecting homelessness.
It really feels like they're creating the perfect storm in that um, they're closing down the ways to treat homelessness now that exist. And at the same time, they're defunding healthcare, which so many of these people depend on, which will mean that if they're going to pay their healthcare bills privately without insurance, which some of them will have to do, they could end up losing their homes. So they're destroying the way to make it better and increasing the way to make it worse for poor people.
It would seem that way to me. Now, the Affordable Health Care Act, I know in Massachusetts, which was just passed, may lessen, possibly. We'll see what happens. May lessen some of that, but I don't really know because it just was introduced, and it's just totally new, and I don't know how it's going to work, and it has so many features that for different constituencies that I don't really know how it's. Let me find it. Here we go. There's a fact sheet. Support people who are experiencing homelessness and other people, and helping people with certain income barriers, like actually buy a home. So, but it has, like I said, 8 pages of help to different populations and things.
Okay,
Yeah, I can definitely see people if they're spending on healthcare and not having enough insurance, they wouldn't be able to afford
yes.
their housing.
Are there other questions? Maybe one or two? Yes, Ricky, and then I think we'll move on to the rest of the meeting. Go ahead, Ricky.
Well, I'm just curious about the population of immigrant families that has shot up recently. Are you aware of why that is? Was that caused by environmental crises, or do you know why?
Well,
And what population? Where are they coming from?
yeah, I'd have to go back to the like just kind of do research in the Boston Globe at least. But what I recall is that do you remember? I mean, this isn't the only source, but do you remember the sort of politically motivated transfer of recent immigrants from Florida to Massachusetts? Do you remember that story? Governor
No.
DeSantis
And from Texas as well.
and
Venezuelans,
Texas.
was it Venezuelans?
It could have been that group and maybe Haitians. I don't know.
Oh,
But Haitians, but that may not have been the population coming from Florida. But some of it, I think, had to do with that. But some of it may also have to do with the fact that people just know or learn through their networks, or maybe if they even land in other states, come in through other states in the United States, that Massachusetts has a right to shelter law for families.
right. Huh, interesting.
It's the only state that now New York, I guess, has it too, but
Yes,
Massachusetts has a right to shelter law.
right. Huh. Oh, that's so interesting. I'd forgotten about Florida putting immigrants on buses and sending them your way. That was a
Yeah,
few years ago.
Massachusetts is one of the sanctuary cities that
Ah,
were targeted by the
see, you,
governors in Florida and Texas.
you do good things and you can expect to be punished. Yeah,
Unfortunately.
I guess it'll play well to certain constituents to, on TV or something. I,
Because it's all it's about is good TV.
yeah,
All right. Thank you so much, Stacy.
mhm,
well, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I'm going to stop recording.
Mhm.
I also wasn't, if anyone was